Hey there, welcome to episode 118 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 8:30 in the morning on Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. The title of today's episode, Motivation. Why do we do the things we do? Or try to. If you are not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation or the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program, we are a 501c3 public charity and Nevada nonprofit corporation formed in June of 2022, which means we are coming up on our third anniversary. Very exciting times. Our purpose statement on file, in case you're wondering, is to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. So why is it not ideate for Vegas or implement for Vegas? Well, it turns out that the greater Vegas area has an innovation district. I myself was in the Maker Innovator group when I was working for a certain chip company up in the Oregon area. And as well, innovation can take many forms, and it's something that people are familiar with. It might be an overused term, but we went for that middle. The greater Vegas area also hopes to be a global innovation hub, a leader in global innovation. And we'll see if that happens. But it fits into the overall or big picture. Plus, not everybody knows what ideation is. And implementation is a little vague. So innovate, it is. Innovate for Vegas. The Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program sometimes has guests. Much more often does not. So it's really more of an audio essay. Covering some aspects of what we're working on, whether it's initiatives or methodologies or big plans, directions. As I mentioned, we are coming up on the end of our third year. A couple of things happen as a result of that, including the end of a gross receipts cap that comes with a 1023 EZ filing. If you are going to become an IRS designated 501c3 tax exempt organization, you can file the 1023 or the 1023 EZ. The price difference is, I think it's $600 for the 23 and $275 for the 23 EZ. Also, the paperwork filing requirements for the EZ are kind of right there in the name, EZ. So it's a reasonable path to take, but you do have a $50,000 cap on your gross receipts for 3 years. So that will play a role in some of the things we start to take on in year 4, which will commence on July 1st this year. So hopefully wherever you have found or wherever you find your audio programs, wherever you found this one, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a summary that I will read to you, and the links for today's episode, the 4 usuals, if you've heard them before, and 2 book links. So let's get started so we can get finished. The summary is thus: why would anyone want to spend their time, effort, and expertise on something that does not pay and may not receive the immediate appreciation it probably deserves? Why? It is a question of motivation. The links for today's episode, of course, the link to our homepage, Innovate for Vegas, .org. So Innovate for Vegas, all one word, no spaces, punctuations, abbreviations. Innovate for Vegas, and then .org. That's our homepage. You can find some basic information there. I've got a few changes to update the gathering. As I'm speaking right now, the gatherings calendar has like an alert box above that section, but some of these things will be moving around. So there's always the, we should update our website item on a to-do list somewhere, but who gets to that to-do list? Projectact.info, project, Project, and then a hyphen, that's the key next to the 0 on your standard keyboard, ACT.info. Projectact.info is mostly our autonomous cohort tessellation initiative. It has its own website. Started life as the Autonomous Cohort Transformation Project, thus Project Act, way back in October of 2022, when we were thinking we could help other organizations become standalone independent nonprofit corporations in their respective states and perhaps a standalone 501c3 or a fiscally sponsored entity and whatnot. Not intended to be legal advice, but more of a how to get started and sharing ideas and whatnot. That's still a component of that, but Project Act is mostly focused on the tessellation, which I've done episodes on previously, so I'll leave that there for now. I will, of course, talk about it more when we reach version 1 beta. agileforvolunteers.org, all one word, no abbreviations, agileforvolunteers.org. That is our take on agile methodologies from 2001, 24 years ago, February, concerning the development of projects. The original Agile was written by and for software engineers or programmers. The Agile for Volunteers methodology is an adaptation of those first principles without the distraction of the Agile industrial complex, and also focused on non-programmers. Volunteers are not full-time employees and they need not be coders. Not everything is code. Agile for Volunteers, and actively developed basically our primary initiative as I'm speaking right now. The main thing we're working on so that we can have it be a part of all of our initiatives and component projects, and we can deploy it in a real world scenario. Those are our scenarios, and then invite others to adopt it, modify it, improve it, etc. Mastodon.vegas, a link that I always mention just so that it's always out there, mastodon.vegas, VEGAS, of course. Mastodon, Mastodon, is an activity pub client that behaves very much like Blue Sky, which itself behaves very much like the old Twitter. Activity pub is more decentralized and federated. It is our preferred solution and will form one of the legs of the table, if you will, for our smart social approach to information sharing and the MyMuni and Welcome initiatives for information awareness. Pretty neat. And then the two links that are not in every other episode, a civic technologist's practice guide by Sid Harrell, that's CYD, Harrell, Harrell. And there's a link to the Goodreads page about civic technologists, a practice guide. This is a book I actually just finished it about 2 weeks ago, I think. It's basically how to become a participant in the civic tech landscape when working with governments. That's basically what civic tech is. You may be familiar with 18F, the USDS, the United States Digital Services. You may have been familiar with Code for America, which sort of intersected with civic tech and civic volunteer organizations, cohorts, brigades, if you will, and various other efforts. You can participate in civic tech as a commercial entity. You can be a vendor working with any government, federal, state, maybe even local. This is a book that's not very thick. It's not very difficult. That's not a commentary on the quality of it. It's just, it's not a slog. You can whip through it pretty quickly, and you will learn just how much fun it can be to try to work with a bureaucracy of any size. And Recoding America by Jennifer Palka, a book I've spoken of previously. Jennifer Palka was the original founder, maybe co-founder, but definitely the founder of Code for America. This is a book telling some of the trials and tribulations of modern civic tech to solve real problems, sometimes under duress. Think pandemic era problems to address. If anyone remembers the COBOL debacle, not to mention healthcare.gov, some other fun times. So you can check those out. These are part of, but not the focus of this episode, but I'm using them as a reference. Also, if you happen to see the cover art for today's episode, the book covers that AI rendered, I used Gemini, a Google product. I find Gemini to be reasonable, but not great. I am not an artist myself. If I had someone that could whip these out as part of my production, I would prefer that. But in the meantime, the book covers rendered are not actual book covers, so don't, they have question marks on them. That's a little AI addition that I didn't anticipate. But there you go. So those are not those are placeholders, or they're icons, if you like. They are not intended to be the exact books, although the titles and the authors' names are on them. But I don't mean to misrepresent them. They're just they're icons. They're icons to be in the cover art. Anyway, let's move on. This is not a book review. As I mentioned, I've recently finished the practice guide, and having read both of these books that I've mentioned, which seems like a small sample size, but the respective authors, that's Sid Harrell and, I think I'm saying your name right, Sid Harrell and Jennifer Polka, these authors are consequential thought leaders in this space. As I've been, Sid Harrell has been involved with Code for America and USDS and some other things. So she has a storied and authoritative insight in this area. I have to ask why someone would want to volunteer, not as an employee, but volunteer to work with the federal bureaucracy here in the U.S., if it's still a viable option in the near term, given the state of affairs for 2025 and maybe the near term. It sounds like it's no fun. Both of these books, and they are a couple of years old each. They've not been written in the last year, so things have certainly changed. They're not reflecting the most recent changes to the status quo around the tech side of our federal bureaucracy. Both of these books paint a picture of chaos, uncertainty that can flip or flop with the election outcomes each couple of years, mostly every 4 years, but it could be influenced by the makeup of Congress and budgeting and so on. And in general, a hill of frustration to climb for those wishing to engage in civic technology. They do aim at federal government layers, but for the most part, but the take home, if I could speak, the take home is that bureaucracy is a challenge, whatever you want to work, or wherever you want to work with it. And that could be with your local government and agencies, it could be with your state government. In particular, some of I cannot talk today. In particular, some of the larger states, if you're going to work with the California bureaucracy, you're in for a long and arduous climb. I am not suggesting that pursuing civic technology or civic tech is a bad idea. Far from it. Pursuing this internally as part of an agency or as a vendor, that is, being within the federal bureaucracy, or as a vendor working directly with an agency within the federal government, or agencies, maybe it's not just one, or maybe within your state or local government, may be a good idea for your interests and pursuits. It might be a good fit. You may actually have a civic tech startup or consultancy, or just a vendor of development services, ongoing engineering services. Maybe you're a COBOL programmer and you want to step in and right some of the wrongs in recent weeks. For an all-volunteer organization such as ours to pursue the steep climb that this environment is, is quite an ask of people who may want to spend an hour or 3 each week. And if that work is done invisibly, distal, that is some project that you get to contribute to far away that has no impact on you, the appeal may fade quickly. And I honestly think, and I've expressed this a little bit, I honestly think this is one of the problems with the Code for America model. I don't know the ins and outs of why the brigade program was sunset, but I have to think this was a thing. We did reboot the original Code for Vegas. Why? I've told the story, the timeline of our reboot and the name change and whatnot, but why did this effort to put the band back together, so to speak, happen? Code for Vegas was founded something like 10 years ago. I've gone into more detail about this previously, but call it 10 years ago, but I think it was actually 12 years ago. And it mostly was working on the open data implementation. It was right when Code for Vegas started. Code for America started. So that was that 2012? Maybe 13 years ago. So Code for Vegas was in the early days before there was a formal brigade program, from what I understand. So Code for Vegas was just part of Code for America. They had the notion back in, so Code for Vegas was helping with an open data implementation for the city of Las Vegas. And I don't know if that extended beyond Las Vegas. So that was way back then. Then the local organization shut down for a while. So we had this notion back in late 2021. And we being, it was another person here in Vegas who had done some work with Hack for LA. His name was David Kim. And then, of course, myself. And the notion came to us at almost the same time. This we can confirm through the third party that mentioned to each of us the mention by the other of this intent. That is, somebody came to me and said, hey, did you know David has the same idea as you? And then vice versa. It was serendipity indeed. Now, I cannot speak to David's motivation specifically, as he received a job offer that took him away from Nevada before we even really got started. So he was out of here, leaving the reboot effort to me. I thought that working with a young entrepreneurial person would help with our outreach to junior and entry-level coders to start. I had not flushed the Kool-Aid for my system regarding a focus on code. That may be true for a civic tech organization, but we are more than that, I would like to think. Though there was a profound mismatch in viewpoints, which I attribute to experience, this younger person just hasn't been around, and that will change over time. But still, the notion of enabling and encouraging ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better was a reasonable pursuit and fit not only for my own recent history in the maker and innovator space, but also seemed to fit the notion that Greater Vegas wanted to be and still wants to be an innovation hub, global, if you ask some people. Along the way, of course, we were getting the I'm not a coder question and a minor kerfuffle with Code for America regarding our name, Code for Vegas, before they ended up pulling the rug on the whole volunteer brigade anyway. So changing our name and moving away from Code for America thinking, that is, the thinking of Code for America, these were both sensible decisions, and they still are. No regrets. So we have two experiments that we're kind of running as part of our organizational roadmap or business plan, or however you want to view it. We are a nonprofit, a public charity, so we're not owned by anyone. We don't have to answer to shareholders per se. We don't compensate anyone, myself included, so we are not on the hook to provide services. We're not committed through any contracts, so we can experiment and try some new ideas and hopefully draw the interest of volunteers who would like to do the same. And then we'll see where these experiments go along those lines. So the first experiment is our labs approach. I don't know if that's still a good name. I was looking at some actual companies, Google Labs, for example. They release products as betas or as experiments, and you could try them out with the understanding that you are working with something that is experimental. It's not a shipping product yet. It's a beta. Anyone who knows Google Mail or Gmail knows that it was a beta product for like 12 years or something. It was maybe it's still not done yet. But it's a way that we can deploy. Well, I'll get to it. Anyway, let me start my bullet items here. Given the level of support we have received from our local governments and agencies, unfortunately, this is essentially none. That's a long story itself. Our approach is to design our own initiatives for our localities based on our own assessments of gaps and needs, and at some point input from members of these communities as we grow awareness of our efforts. That is, we'd love to have people who live here or visit here be able to reach out or reach in and say, hey, here's a thing that somebody could fix or solve, or and I always go to my favorite example is the beehive that I found across the street from an elementary school. Good luck getting someone to care about that. So some place where someone could, and the city of Las Vegas does use See-Click Fix right now. I personally think a homegrown platform that is controllable and meets the needs directly of a locality would be a better idea than it going with a commercial solution. In general, if I can interrupt my flow here for a moment, in general, if you're thinking civic volunteerism, working on civic tech or civic projects of any kind, civic elevation, community elevation, when you have to use an external vendor, and the federal government probably faces the same challenges, you basically go to a vendor, and if you're not going to pay them for customization, you take what they have, you compete on price based on if you're the vendor, you make a bid for some RFP or request for proposal. There's probably some vendor process for varies, place to place and so on. And eventually you are the winner and you implement your solution, and look at that. Now the vendor has an interest in what we could call vendor lock-in. They may or may not publish their data in a standard way. They may not be publishing open data. right? And from what I understand or what I've noticed, I don't know if this has changed, but C-Click Fix is deployed in many localities, including Las Vegas and outer Clark County. So we're within the Clark County area. So Clark County, City of Las Vegas, they own the data as far as I'm aware. So you are not necessarily able to access it. I would love to see an equivalent issue tracker that would publish data as open data so that anyone could use it for any purpose. And if municipalities would do such a thing, you end up with an empowered population, communities. The people that make up those communities are able to use the data that is essentially them, right? Who else is contributing to C-Click Fix? The people that live in a particular area. So they shouldn't hand that off and then they don't have rights to that data anymore. That's my opinion. By pursuing initiatives designed and driven by our organization directly, we are not beholden to external entities to drive these decisions. We are not at risk of cancellation of any particular initiative. Like, oh, well, funding dried up, that's it. And we can treat initiatives as persistent, as in they need not come to an end, serving as ongoing educational and practical elements of our portfolio for those curious and perhaps joining the effort. In other words, if we have a project or an initiative with component projects that could use some refresh, that could use some modernization, that have a couple of features or maybe even a couple of bugs, and we'd like to continue using our projects or initiatives, the outcomes of volunteer effort, let me just put it this way. When you volunteer your time, effort, and expertise for something, and then it gets canceled, now what? Do you feel like you've maybe wasted some of that time? You've educated yourself, maybe you've educated others, maybe it's something to stick on your resume or something along those lines. But at the end of the day, you didn't set out to contribute your volunteer assets, your time, effort, and expertise, just to have it thrown away. If the beginning of any initiative was, we're only going to work on this a year and then we're going to throw it away, I'm hoping most of the people in the room would say, can we work on something else then? So we don't have to worry about that. So we can always have projects, even if they're, version 3, 3.5. Oh, you know what? People have been asking for this new feature. Or, hey, you know what? We could, if anyone wants to learn Rust or Zig or Go or Lisp or Scheme, if anyone wants to take an existing initiative, component projects that make it up, and try to make things faster, safer, fewer security, vulnerability possibilities. If you want to try learning a new language, you can take an existing platform and move it to a new language and see how that works. You want to implement it in COBOL? You can do that too. It's a good place for people to jump in if they are not familiar with open source development, for example. And I'm really speaking of software here, but the same goes for any of the other non-software elements. There could be some graphics or text or documentation or websites, anything for existing projects, especially if they've caught on. There are always places where we could modernize, or in general, ask people to check the water, test the waters, check out the landscape, see if they're interested by starting in an existing project or initiative where they are familiar with it. So there's every reason in the world to not shut down, archive, or just generally throw away the work of others. There's a legacy, may as well continue it. As our initiatives reach a usable state, we can deploy them as lab experiments, hence the labs notion, powered by our civic volunteers with the potential to monetize or even spin off entirely to form an external vendor. Our open transit initiative is an example of the latter, where locally developed tools for public transit consumers, riders of buses, could become viable for real use in a business relationship with our local transportation authority. And that could work in other localities as well. Maybe. More likely, we can spin off initiatives as potential revenue generators, where those who contribute or contributed as volunteers are first to be a part of such an venture. So essentially, you get first refusal if you contributed your time, effort, and expertise. And even if you decide not to continue, maybe you got a job doing something else. Maybe you had your volunteer efforts on the old CV, and then you got a job, so that when a spin-off or a lab deployment comes around, you might say, I don't really have time, but I can still, I'm still a contributor. I can still contribute into the future and go from there. So it's really, and I always say this, I don't want people to work for free, but I want them to be willing to work for free. This is kind of a startup mentality. So if you're willing to put some time in at the beginning, some volunteer time, effort, and expertise, then the rewards that come out the other end are, well, let's just say you have dibs. So it's not a guarantee, far from it, but certainly the people that are willing to dive in and learn something along the way, but also enable others to do the same and to possibly deploy something that's actually worthwhile and actually works and actually does cool stuff. And that's always a possibility when you enable the people working on it to have that possibility to deploy their vision and to let them enable them. Actually, I don't really like when you let people do things, but but in this sense, to let them run with it and not have a project sponsor or some municipal partner, as Code for America and other civic tech organizations like to say. Municipal partners can change requirements, or the funding might disappear, or whatever the case. Without that potential limitation, the whole team can approach an initiative with only possibility ahead, not the looming specter of cancellation and whatnot. I've worked on projects commercially that get canceled. It's the same sort of like, well, why did we bother? It can be somewhat demoralizing. So let's just skip over that part. And then our second experiment is working beyond Greater Vegas. In our early days, so back in the summer of 2022, probably, the summer, we got our IRS determination in October. So in the period between June and October, we were filing paperwork and doing some outreach and telling the story and so on. We reached out to Hack for Reno, a former Code for America brigade in the Reno area, right here in Nevada. It's right there in the name. We were blown off, unfortunately, and Hack for Reno eventually faded back into obscurity as the rug was pulled. Their website isn't even alive anymore. We have also reached out a bit through adjacent meetups, such as the Civic Hacker Meetup run by Lori McNeil in California, via meetups held by the Alliance of Civic Technologists, which is an attempted reboot of Code for America by some former brigades. I think it's 15 former brigades. You have to be a former Code for America brigade to join, unless they've actually changed that requirement now. And via online meetups held by various cohorts, mostly former Code for America brigades, navigating the new normal over the last year and into the future. So since the brigade sunset, which it's been a while. So I think it was December of 2023. And so it's been a year and a half, essentially about 18 months. With our level of active volunteerism here in Vegas at essentially zero, I have spoken about this before, the notion of civic volunteerism along the lines we have proposed and are pursuing are new, and the most likely participants may not quite grok what we're doing, hence the FOMO, or fear of missing out, approach we can try as we deploy. So we'll deploy things very slowly because few people are putting any volunteer assets into it. I need to have a better way to summarize time, effort, and expertise. Those are three important elements. I don't want to diminish any of them. And with similar stories heard from other organizations, so other former brigades and whatnot, or even existing brigades, have low turnout, low recidivism when it comes to new people coming, kicking the tires. Participation is just down in a post-pandemic world, and it may have been starting before that. It's hard to say. New participants are not always returning, though, and so on. We all have similar problems to different degrees. So even though Vegas has no one at this point indicating interest or showing up for anything, so we've scaled way back on our local engagement, local outreach. We used to have monthly hackathons. Those are paused indefinitely. But now that we know that other places are having, maybe not to the same degree, but are having a reduction in participation, a slowing down of expression of interest, and so on, I have to wonder, so what about this? If you are talking, or if I am talking to a group of people who are themselves civic volunteers, and this was first true when I was in a civic hackers meetup, I heard, well, we are having trouble getting volunteers too. And I said, well, so we have low turnout and participation in respective localities. Why are we not considering a collaboration between the various cohorts amongst the people who do show up? So again, if you're talking to 10 people and they all say, oh yeah, we're having trouble getting people to show up. Well, the 10 of us showed up. is there just no way that we can work together and collaborate and kind of enable each other and find ways to reach that FOMO point so that other people go, oh, okay, I see what you're working on. So the people who do show up, who do want to drive a revitalization of these types of efforts, these are the people that are at such a meeting. And this is why we have Project ACT, the autonomous cohort tessellation, which I've talked about previously. And yet there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in that. It's more of a, oh no, we're just thinking locally. But this will fit nicely with our Agile for Volunteers initiative. So Project ACT, Agile for Volunteers, will hopefully make part-time collaboration easier, as well as discovery and then connection, communication, and collaboration with Project ACT resources. But of course, the critical ingredient is people who want to step outside the comfort zone of, oh, we just work on local projects. We're waiting to be handed a project by some other organization that we're a part of, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually need some outside the box entrepreneurial, innovative thinkers. So that's the secret ingredient. So those are our two sort of foundational experiments. I don't mean as in our foundation. I just mean that they're underpinning everything else we're doing. So when asked, well, what does it mean to work on the Open Transit Initiative, as I suggested, or the MyMuni Initiative? Well, here's the plan. We're going to try to deploy it. We'll try to turn it into a commercially viable thing. It might spin off, or it might just be powered by Innovate for Vegas civic volunteers with a list of people who contributed, and it can be operated in a partnership with a third-party arm's length commercial entity, or there are any number of ways. There are so many ways to turn open source projects into monetizable efforts. So we don't want to see people throwing away their time. So that's always on the table, is to turn your volunteer time up front into some sort of a benefit later. Volunteer pay, though, is awful, and the benefits are questionable in the near term. Except for the alternative, anybody who is entrepreneurial in any way can probably identify with this notion that a gap or a problem or a pain point is an opportunity to take action, maybe make something out of that, whatever it is, to fix it, improve it, whatever the case. Waiting for someone else to do it may be a long wait indeed. True entrepreneurs do not wait for other people to solve problems. I don't have time there's 24 hours in a day, and then at night you can tackle new stuff. And you know what they say about wanting something done right. You do know that, right? This far along, it would be easy to cut the losses. The short-term returns for driving our efforts are negative financially. Out-of-pocket expenses, though not huge, are not zero. They're not even large, but they're not zero. And we could just move along. But for the fact that opportunity cost is nearly zero, and the potential upside is substantial, not in unicorn startup terms, but as far as return on investment or the solving of local issues, elevating communities and elevating a pool of experienced people who know what civic volunteerism might lead to. So you're essentially cultivating a culture of innovation by driving it at the civic level, thinking locally, solving local problems, interacting with people that you can see, that you can talk to, that you can sit down with and engage with. And you can actually see results or feel them or smell them, whatever the case. And again, not only software could take many forms, but for the fact, the opportunity cost zero, the cycle needs to begin somewhere, ideally locally, but also beyond, which is one reason to focus on remote participation and the remote participation value proposition. We don't need to have support up front from our local government and agencies. They can come to us later. So we can just do that and then see what happens. They may not be interested in us today, but if we work directly with let's put it another way. Our customers, if you like, are the people of our communities. A municipal partnership kind of makes the customer the partner. You're kind of beholden to your sponsor organization, your government agency, etc. Maybe you're working with staffers that work for your government, or maybe you're, so the list goes on. Your municipal partner is kind of your customer, you're serving them. But if your customer is the people that you see and work with and know in your communities and so on, you can just work for them directly. And then later, somebody from the city or some agency or school district or whatnot, they might say, "Hey, you're actually solving a real problem. How can we work together?" And you say, "Boy, where were you when I called you a year ago?" But yeah, we need to begin this somewhere and empower normal people to be a part of solutions, not waiting for people to even listen to what the problems are. Ultimately, as I have said before many times, we can develop and deploy real things. Not everything is code. Remember that. So the real thing might not be an app on a phone or a website. Those are probably part of it, but they're not it. Not necessarily. For local use or for use by our many annual visitors to the greater Vegas area, it's maybe still almost 40 million. Maybe we'll see how this year goes and next year. This means more people trying out ideas and more potential to get the story of civic volunteerism and the potential upsides out to more people. If someone experiences something cool while visiting our town, perhaps they might ask why there isn't a similar effort in their own town. Maybe there is, and they don't even know about it. So a lot of our work, if we can invite and if we can encourage people in other places to participate and collaborate on stuff that we're working on, and by the way, vice versa, that is also a two-way street. When we deploy, if people in other cities want to contribute to the Open Transit Initiative, and it works in other cities as well. And thanks to GTFS, the standard way of getting real-time transit data and all that, we've talked about this in other episodes. If we can base it on GTFS or make code that is modular, we can deploy an application or a platform that could be localizable. So depending on the prevalent languages spoken in your locality, it could work with different types of routing and just a variety of things. If we collaborate across localities, we might end up with a solution that is open for extension and bug fixes, of course, if there are any. But you also connect the development cycle across these localities. If someone comes to Vegas visiting and says, "Hey, this was much easier to use the bus system from the freeway or to get up and down the strip. I'm sorry, from the airport to get up and down the strip," whatever the case is. I remember 2 years ago when I was here and they were using that other thing I don't even know what it was called. Now, much easier to get around and so on. Or maybe people who live in Vegas can get around, get to work, get to school, get home. But if other people, when they come here to visit, or other people in other cities say, "Oh yeah, we worked on that too," it's not powered by Innovate for Vegas. It's powered by individual people from different organizations, different cohorts. So we kind of start spreading the word locally from the bottom up. We're not beholden to federal bureaucracy. We're beholden to people in different places and making them happy, which should make us happy. See title of episode. On the personal side, each person who takes part in any volunteer effort of any kind has their own motivation, of course, and it should be clear and meaningful to that person to make their efforts sustainable. If you're volunteering for something, whether it's a canned food drive, whether it's building a new barn, whether it's serving food at a holiday outreach event, the list goes on. There's always opportunities. If you find yourself asking, "Why am I doing this?" Or if you're doing it because your company will pay you to do it, etc., well, that's up to you. Everybody has their own reasons. It's not always obvious to newcomers, but volunteering actually is a two-way street. Could be more than two ways. The other volunteers invest in a new volunteer and vice versa. It is important to encourage awareness of this. If I volunteer my time, others might depend on me. And if I decide, this is not worth my time, other people might say, "Yeah, but okay, now we got to start over." Not everything is just free. So that's something to be aware of. It's something that is not always the case, that not everybody is aware of that. For myself, I have been contributing my volunteer resources in a variety of ways to a variety of causes over the past many years, since before I lived in Vegas. This has been a learning experience here, though, to develop this platform, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, and to learn about the many challenges doing that along the way. Ultimately, my motivation for a great many things, including this, is I want to see if it will work, which is particularly true of our primary initiatives as I record this, the Agile for Volunteers initiative and the Project ACT Tessellation initiative. The transformation part of Project ACT, like I said, is kind of backburnered, but still there. Of course, a population that is aware, that is connected to what goes on around them and could be a part of making those goings on better in some ways is important. And I would like to think we are contributing to that possibility, which is perhaps over the next very tall mountain because it's an uphill climb. So there you go. That is just a few words on motivation. It's difficult to sell motivation to people. It's more a question of, well, here's what we're trying to accomplish. And if you are interested, the motivation has to start from within. You can't pitch it. I was told early on, you should go to the college and recruit there. And I said, we're not recruiting. We're not trying to hire people. We don't pay anything. So it's a hard sell in that way. But probably the best way to reach people who are not already aware is to show, don't tell, what we're trying to accomplish. And then we'll go from there. So Agile for Volunteers and Project Act Tessellation will not be big, huge draws. There won't be people coming to Vegas from around the world and saying, "Oh, Agile for Volunteers, show me how this works." You know, they're very meta. They're very infrastructure based. How can we make the most of volunteer time, effort, and expertise when we're working on initiatives and have some continuity and reach out to other organizations who are not local so they can contribute and vice versa. Project Act is to enable that outreach and discovery. But it's things like My Muni and Welcome, like Open Transit, like social, Smart Social, and even vLocal. That would be an interesting one if we can tie it to economic possibilities. These are the things that I will eventually hope draw people in, sort of the lean in or the aha moment. Oh, okay, now I see. So can I volunteer my time? Well, you missed out on versions 1, 2, and 3, so you can still participate. But the people that are working on version 1, 2, and version 1 get first dibs on what we're doing, and so on, right? But yeah, so you can't really sell motivation. You can only try to enable it, I guess you could say. That's on the table. Year 4 coming up. Let's see what we can do about it. Oh, by the way, I think I mentioned this at the top of the show. Mastodon for Vegas, mastodon.vegas, are coming soon. Our nascent, maybe aspirational Mastodon server that will be geo-focused, obviously Vegas-oriented. Hopefully will be a donation driver. So as we escape our $50,000 gross receipt cap for each of the first 3 years, if we deploy a Mastodon server in the cloud somewhere, ideally, if it can be a donation driver, there will be people willing to participate financially in our efforts, and hopefully that the cost is set. Now, it wouldn't be a subscription. It would be a donation to a nonprofit. So you're not buying a product, you're supporting an organization. One of the bills we might need to pay is our cloud hosting for such a deployment. So it's something to think about. But as we enter year 4, it frees us up to do more donation driving efforts, to enable people to support directly the efforts of civic volunteerism. And then we could still spin things off for labs approach to deployment, or even spin off actual startups. And again, the open transit vendor option, and it doesn't have to be in Vegas either. So whether the Southern Nevada Regional Transportation Commission is interested or not, we can still form a sort of a vendor consultancy for ongoing development and support and so on. So people that find interest in that could still participate in that. So the motivation to do all this stuff has a path in front of it, right? So the motivation really is to stay on a path that can be described. It's not wandering into the unknown. So yeah, actually finding that motivation on an individual basis and wishing to put it to use in a nice collaborative way is the experiment as we, again, enter year 4. That's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support, even though listening to an audio program, hopefully more than once, more than one episode, is a form of support because you know what we're trying to accomplish. The story is being told more frequently than weekly, but it takes the form of an audio program every week. You have some idea where we are, where we're headed, and maybe you want to be a part of that. Who knows? You do. Take care. Until next week.